Okay, hello everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an example of the wash for the students that are not here in class, and it's just putting your pigment and whatever it's going to be mixed with. In this sense, it's going to be acrylics and watercolors, so we're just mixing it with water, but it could also be that you are using oils where you would do a layer of terp, or you might have your terp and a little bit of linseed oil. And we talked about that in another video of using oils. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do, or that I'm going to need, is I need my water and I need a rag that I can use, and I need a large brush. So if you don't have, for the students, I want you to take out your largest brush, whatever it is, that's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an example here of a sky of a wash. And I'm going to do it pretty fast, and I'm going to do two different colors. Last week I showed you when you're doing your wash, if you wanted to dilute it, you can either dilute it with water or you can add tea white, right? So in other words, if my sky was blue, I could add white to it to lighten it, to make it a light blue, or I could just dilute it with water and have a light blue that way. Okay, it just depends if you want it to be more opaque, right? Or you can use a blue that could also be more of a transparent color, like ultramarine. So I'm going to dip my brush and I'm going to wipe it off here on my rag, and I'm going to pick up the color. When I mix my colors, you definitely have to have two spaces in between. You see how my palette is spaced? That's very important, because when you're mixing the paint, if you don't have enough space in between, all the colors are going to get muddy. Okay, so that's very important. And you want to mix it with your palette knife, and you want to take your palette knife and you want to pick up the color and you want to mix it until it's one pure color. Unless you do not want the colors to blend, then you can just mix it a little, and then when you pick it up, you might have blue and white together on here. Then when you put it here, you'd have blue and white on your canvas. But if you wanted a pure blue and white and you wanted it to be light blue, you would mix it very well with your palette knife until you have light blue. Now, the watercolors I'm going to do separately next in the next demo. And with the watercolors, you don't need to have a palette knife. Obviously, you would just be taking out a little bit of your blue and diluting it in water. Okay, so we're going to start right now with that. So my brush, again, I dipped it off and I wiped it off in my rag. It's important that you dab it like this in a rag. You never want to go with watercolors or acrylics directly from the water and then move it to the canvas or the watercolor paper. If you have watercolor paper, it needs to be mounted on a board and taped down, right? Otherwise, it's going to buckle. If you want your watercolor paper and you want the wash to be smooth, I'm going to show you in a minute, you would use your wash brush and pre-treat the watercolor paper by going over it very lightly with your brush to wetten the watercolor paper. And I'll show you the difference when you put the color on, and it makes the color smoother. If you wanted a more rough texture with the watercolor, you would not wet the paper ahead of time. Okay? With acrylics, you're not going to wet the canvas ever. Okay? So now that my brush is saturated, I'm going to take my trusty palette knife. Now let me move it where you can see what I'm doing in video land, right? And what I'm doing is I'm taking a tiny bit of, here I have my cerulean blue, and I'm mixing it into my white, and I'll show you. My white is really, and I'm really mixing it until I get one color, okay? Don't forget to dip your palette knife back and clean your palette knife back into wash here, and I'm kind of wiping it off with the rag so you don't want things to stick on your palette knife. Also, your brushes, you don't want to take the brush, have paint in it, and lie the brush down. You want to kind of swirl your brush in the water and wipe it off on the rag after using the color, because acrylics will dry on the brush and it'll be hard to move it. Even with the watercolors, you don't want to do that. You want to clean the brushes, okay? Now, so I'm finally ready. Dip, wipe. Now I have the color that I want, this blue. So I'm going to take this blue, and as you notice, I only have my blue on the tip of my brush. Okay? The same for the watercolors. I'm going to do it in a minute. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a drier wash. I'm going to show you. I'm going to do this real fast. I'm going to go across the canvas like this. And I'm going like this and like this at the same time. And I'm going to show you a couple of things. If you don't take enough paint, what students do is they either don't take enough paint or they don't take enough water. You have to have a balance between the two. If you do, you're going to get these kind of rough strokes on your canvas, right? And I want to show you what they are because I want to show you how to fix them, right? So I want to show you, because they're going to happen everywhere. So you just dip your brush back in your water. You do not go back there with the water. You're going to just pick up some more paint at this time and more of the color that you mix. And now you have enough on your brush. And I want to show you something. What I do with my brush is when I get these strokes, you see like this, like I don't have enough, I'm going to dip, wipe, and pick up. I'm going to make another mistake on purpose, okay? Just so you know. Say I go like this and I wipe off my brush and I have too much water in my brush. Now I'm going to do this on purpose, okay? What happens is I get this water consistency, you see? And I don't want that. That's the worst thing that you can have, even with acrylics or watercolors, because it's going to buckle the paper. So you want to get rid of it right away. That's when you're going to take your rag and you're just going to rub it into the canvas. And you have to do it while it's wet. Okay? And I can kind of smooth it out. You don't have to cover it all with white again. Sometimes when students want to do a wash, with watercolors or acrylics, they might do a wash like this, and then they might come in and push into the paper where they see these clouds, where they see these light areas that they know that are going to come in. So they get an even wash. So I'm going to do it again the right way. I'm going to add some more white here to my TV lamp. Just adding white. And I'm going to smooth this out until I get the color that I want. And I'm going to put this on. And I want to show you something. Do you see how now the paint is a little bit thicker? It doesn't look as thin. Okay, so I'm showing you all these different things. If I put this on, I put the paint on doing this. And I showed you this before in the video, but I kind of blend it like this. So I'm putting it on like this. Right? But I'm blending it like this. Again, if this is a lot of paint and it's really thick and I don't want it that thick, I can have my beautiful rag. I'm just going to show you again. And I just gently wipe it out. Sometimes students like doing this if they do not have a large wash brush. So what they do is they have a smaller brush like this, and when they're trying to go across, they can't get as much body. Right? And say, for example, even in a watercolor, you have a smaller mop brush. That's when you can use your rag and spread it out evenly on the paper, okay? But what I'm trying to say is that your wash should be very smooth and kind of thin, the first wash. This is more transparent. It's kind of where I want it to be, okay? So I don't want it to be very thick in the beginning. And when I smooth it, I'm just going back and forth. You know, if I see a light area, I'm going to cover that up, and I'm just kind of dusting it. I know you're too young to remember what a broom is. Probably no one has it. But it's like if you were using a broom and you're just sweeping. Now, the next color that I'm going to move into here is going to be a pink. Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to take this brush, and I'm going to clean it, and I'm going to swirl it in my water. I'm not going to push it deep or hard in the bottom. I'm just getting out the color. And you need 2 separate cups, one for your lights and one for your darks, so you don't contaminate the color. So that's going to be for my blue. Now I'm going to mix my next paint, which is going to be a pink. Okay? So you're going to use your palette knife, and you're always going to move the darker color into the lighter color. Okay? Always, because as we learn, the lighter color is very powerful. So I'm going to add more white, and you want to make sure that the balance is the color that you want. Now what I usually do is I have my color palettes of the colors that I mixed already together, so I know exactly what I'm putting on. You want to mix these two colors while they're wet, okay? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to put in some pink here. And I'm just showing because some students have two different colors on their canvas. Now, obviously, you don't want that line, right? So you have two ways that you can do that. You can blend it with a dry brush, you see? Or you can go over, because I'm going to pull this up a little bit and show you something. Let's say that this is dried and it has. I'm just going to go with the same brush and I'm going to drag some blue. And I'm going to lightly feather this area where it's dry, you see? And I'm going to go all the way up. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to bring a little bit of pink clouds in here very lightly. Okay? Bring a little bit more pink. And I'm just going to see where the clouds are going to be. And I'm just giving myself now that I laid down my blue, okay, just where, I'm using this and I'm kind of feathering it. We talked about this before last week when we were doing the clouds, and it's not even really building it up. It's kind of just going to the point where I'm saying, okay, I know where these clouds are going to be. Here, another cloud here. Most clouds are going to drastically change, but at least I know where they are in my space. And then I'm going to blend this area, and where the two areas meet, I'm going to lightly blend them together. And I'm going to go back with a little bit of blue. I want to bring in some more clouds. And I'm doing this because at the same time with this blending, you see how I'm bringing the blue back down into here now? At the same time with this being blending, I want to show you how you can achieve two different colors on top of each other here, where they're blended. And you still see a little bit of that pink coming through, but not all of it, okay? I also want to show you different types of clouds. So these are going to be thick, and these are lighter. Okay, if I want to bring more blue sky in here, I still haven't cleaned my brush now. I can go back and I can bring more of that color. Let's cover this up just so I can show you. I can bring more of that color, but I have to slowly feather the brush back and forth. So you really don't make a mistake. I'm going to show you the same thing with watercolors. With watercolors, it's a little bit easier, and you can change the color of that sky. If I want to make that more pink, right, I could just go with some red, let's make it a little purple. And I can bring that, for a nice contrast in here, okay? So pretty simple with the blending. I'm going to bring that down. Now, I'm going to move this. This is what I call blocking in my colors. Let's say I want to put a mountain here. I'm going to get rid of my wash brush. Maybe I'm going to make that mountain a purple blue. And this is what everybody has to do at this point, just to outline. It's what we call masking in the colors. Usually when I'm painting with oils, my whole canvas underneath would be probably like an ochre I might mix, or a red earth, and then I put blue on top just to make it pop a little bit more. You don't have to do that in this painting, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little bit of the mountain color. So we're going to have a little bit of purple here and maybe some blue. And we talked about a continuous palette last week when I said one color, you're just adding another color to the other color to the other color. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this outline of this mountain. So I'm just going to put this here for now. I'm not spending any time on it. I don't care if it looks good or not at this point. I'm just kind of putting the outline of where this is going to be. And I know this is going to be a little bit darker. So this is going to be my darker area, my mountain. I could also use the palette knife when I'm doing the mountain. If I wanted to do it, I'll show you another way. I'm gonna go over this. Let's say I had this purplish color again. I'm gonna make it darker. I could use my palette knife, and what I could do is I could put on the shape of the mountain with this knife. And I just have this color in here. And as you can see, I'm moving my knife to make these kind of angles. And the reason I'm doing this is some of you do have mountains, right? Let's just put this here. And then I'm putting in these different colors. This could be a blue mountain, it could have been brown. You can change it to brown. But usually you'd have 3 or 4 colors in your mountain. It might be like a brown, a light brown, and maybe, some ochre on top. And if I wanted to, I'm still having, I clean my knife, I could go with some white, and I could lightly lay the white or the light colors where I think they're going to be. And then I'm going to let that dry because I'm going to come back with those colors and lay that on top, okay? I'm going to take this off because I don't want it to be like this. But I just want to show you something. And you can also remove it, okay? Now, the reason I'm removing it is because I'm going to put it back later, but I just want to show you, this is going to be my wash from now, okay? So I'm going to cover this. Just in this area, I'm going to do this real fast. Okay? Now, the other thing is, what I can do also is with my round brush. So this is a brush that kind of that's round, call it a round brush. Or I can use a flat brush, but it has to be a brush that's thicker. And what I can do is I can take out green. So I need a student that has a dark phthalo green. Can you give me some dark phthalo green here? I'm out of the camera for a minute. Just a little bit here. Yeah, just a little bit. That's beautiful. That's good enough. Thank you. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I have my brush. I'm going to dip it in my water, wipe it off on my rag, and I'm going to pick up 3 colors at once. So I have some ochre. You could use yellow. I have another color green, and I have a dark color green. Going back in my ochre here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this green here, and I want to show you something. When I dot this, some of you have landscapes where you want to make 2 or 3 colors at once. You can pick 2 or 3 of those colors up on your brush, and you're just dotting it like this. You see, and then you can go back if you had a darker color, where you're making this look like foliage and grass right away. Okay, so I'm doing that because some of you do have landscapes where you have this grass growing, and you don't have to clean your brush with the watercolor either. I'm going to do it in a minute. You're just going to go back and forth with that. Let's pretend we had some orange with the green underneath, like we have in my landscape here. And then I don't need to clean my brush. I'm just picking up that orange. And you see how that orange is kind of just blending with this color to make this brown directly on the canvas, okay? So that's one thing, just picking it up and kind of just dotting it where you might see this color. You could exaggerate the color if it's the fall, right, and make it really brighter, or you can blend the colors, okay? So that's one method if you're doing that for a landscape. The next thing is, some of you have washes at the bottom of your, where you have a lake or something like that. And usually the color of the sky is reflected in that lake, okay? So that means that I would have to pull this color down. And it's also kind of transparent. So if you had this really thin, you're gonna have this thin here. Okay, so we're gonna make this, let's do this lake down here. Now I'll tell you something. When you're using the brush, you have an option. Sometimes you have, how can I say, water that is rough. So you can use the brush going across to make those strokes already in there for the water. Or you could, for this water that was going whichever which way. Or you could smooth them out and then go with your small brush on top. So I'm just gonna we're just masking out this at this point. This is what everyone's going to have on their canvas. Okay? And we're just going to put, I'm going to put land somewhere else. But I'm going to put this through here. And then to make sure this is smooth, I'm going to take my rag and I'm just going to wipe this out for me. So I can go a little bit faster and then drag it. And that's going to be my lightest color. And then I would start building up that color on top. Okay, so I have this being reflected here. So I'm going to finish this just fast to show you what I mean. Okay, so let's make this, I don't know, a blue. Just bring this down here. The other thing is when you have these lines, most of you, if you have a horizon line, you don't want a line like this. So you want to put in, it might not be the exact color you're going to use, but you want to look at your values and say, okay, I know that this line here, you see what I mean, it's going to be darker. I'm going to go over this with a dark blue and change the color of the mountain. But you want to put in these colors because whatever color is going to be here is going to be reflected here. So this is going to be a dark blue and I'm going to bring this down here, okay? So again, wash. Now, I'm going to do it again for the watercolors. So stay there. Okay, so for watercolor paper, it's a little bit different. I'm going to mount it on a board. When I mount it on my board, I usually work flat with watercolor paper, but because it's a demo, I'm going to have it up like this. And the other thing is, I usually use watercolor tape, so painter's tape is okay, but if you have gum tape, it's even better. It looks brown. It looks kind of like a paper bag, and you lick the sides or put water on it. The thing with watercolor paper is when it's wet, it stretches, and then when it's dry, it shrinks. So the problem is, if you don't have it stretched the proper way, it's going to have, it's going to shrink, and you're not going to like what's going to happen when it shrinks. Okay? Now, usually when I do this neatly on the sides. I'm not going to do this all around here. Sometimes I do that when I want to border. Don't put it like this. Let me show you properly. So when I remove this, I get like an even border. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, there's two different types of paper with watercolor. This one has a texture, so we have hot and cold press. It depends on what kind of paper that you're using. It's also helpful for students when they are using the watercolors that they, I don't want to mix my watercolors and my acrylics. When they're using the watercolors, that they remember that they have enough space in their palette. So what I tell students to do is buy, instead of those store-bought palettes, go out and buy an ice cube tray. They're much better for watercolors because they have like about 12 little pieces where you can put the little ice inside with ice forms, and you'll never make a mistake with mixing your colors. Now you're still going to use a large brush. Usually with watercolors I would use a mop brush, and I'm going to do the top half with wetting the paper first and showing you what it looks like with the stroke, and the bottom dry. So I'm going to dip it in my water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a lot of the color, and I'm going to do two different things. So I'm going to pick up the color, and I'm going to wipe it off on my rag. That's really important with the watercolors. And I'm going to go slightly across. And if I go very lightly, I get a beautiful gradation. and it's never a problem. The paper doesn't buckle. It's so easy and so light and perfect, okay? If I want to remove a color, I could take another dry rag when it's wet or a brush, and I could pull, I could keep pulling out that color. I could also wet it and pull out the color. Pretty simple. Now I'm going to show you something. I'm going to wet this paper up at the top. Remember when I said about pre-wetting the paper? So let's wet the paper up here. And now I'm going to go, again, with my watercolor wash, and I'm going to go on top. And you see how more fluid, first of all, I have more water on the paper, but I get a little bit more of the texture. It's hard to see from back there. Okay, and I'm going to start building it up darker just so you can see. And the thing is, with the acrylics and the watercolors, you cannot rush. Don't rush to do the wash. What happens if you rush? It's going to be a disaster. Back and forth very lightly with your mop brush or your largest brush, sweeping it. Okay? Now I'm going to do it here in the dry again. The other thing is watercolors have a lot of water or in the pigment. The pigment is very loose, so you don't really need a lot of water. Now, if I put too much color, again, I can wipe it out. Let's move it all the way up here. But I want to show you the most mistakes that students do with watercolors. Don't do this. I'm going to do it to show you how not to do it. What they do is they dip their brush in the water, they wipe it off on the rag, and then they pick up the color. They forget to re-dip it on the rag. Usually you don't have to do that when you're painting watercolors and you know how much water you're picking up. But in the beginning, you might not. Then you have too much water on your brush. And what happens is when they do this, they get this, and then they get frustrated. And what they do, just like with acrylics, is they keep going back and forth, and all they do is get more lines and more lines, and they can't get rid of the lines. Because what you're doing is when you're going back and forth, you're not taking off the paint. You see? And then the paper starts buckling, and it looks horrible. And the thing is, also with the acrylics, that can happen. So what you do is this happens, you can take your rag and wipe it out again, or you can pull it, wipe it off, pull it, wipe it off, pull it, wipe it off, pull it, wipe it off. You can keep doing that, but remember, every time you keep going across the paper, you're making the paper more buckly. So sometimes it's better either to use a dry brush and just pull it out, or again, you can use a tip of a clean sponge if you want a texture, or you can just wipe it out very gently with your rag. In other words, I want to see a perfect wash today. Okay, very thin, no lines. Now, I sent you videos yesterday, I think it was yesterday, where we did, hold on, I bought the canvas. So I did this demo of this wash, right? I didn't finish it, I did like in 5 minutes. This is another one. This is a different type of texture, right? When I did that, that has lots of texture on the canvas. And of course, I'm going to build it up. This is just my 5-minute lay down, okay? You have to ask yourself, what kind of canvas do you want? Some of you might not want it to look realistic. You might want a lot of texture. If that's the case with the watercolors, you're really going to stay away from the water, right? And you're just going to use the paint and the brush. If you don't want that with the acrylics, then you are just going to use your brush and not a lot of water, right? And you're going to have to look at your subject matter, and you're going to have to say, okay, well, here's my subject matter. What do I want to happen in the, in the sky? Do I want the waves really dramatic? Where I'm going to use these large, beautiful strokes, or do I want them very smooth? Today, I want everyone just to practice the wash and masking out the colors and making sure that they blend, okay? That's what everyone's doing. Now, some of the students do have, not everyone has a wash. For yours, you have different shapes. So I want to see the colors at least in washes in those areas. Then you can go back and build them up. Okay? But I want to see everybody to that point where you have the sky at least reflected in the bottom here, and I want to see those washes smooth. Now, let's pretend. What happens if I do a wash and the color's dry? I'm back to this painting again. Okay? Like I've been talking and gabbing for a while, right? And you got to go back to your canvas. What are you going to do if you want to blend two colors and they dry? With watercolors or acrylics, what are you going to have to do? You have two options. You could go over the whole color and start again, or you could just start where the color meets the other color where you want to blend. So say, for an example, you want to blend this dark color into this blue. You'd have to put, with my brush, I'd have to pick up that dark color and just put it here. And then with a separate brush, I'd have to pick up this blue color and then put it here. And then with a dry brush, I would have to blend them together very lightly. Otherwise, I got to redo the whole thing again. Okay? So I'm going to walk around, and once you have your swatches, everyone should at least have their colors blocked in. And I'm going to finish this and block in these colors now. Okay? So I want everyone to do that right now. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to see these beautiful, you can practice on the paper that I gave you as far as doing the washes, okay? If you made a mistake and you have to cover your canvas, you're going to have to do it with white. If you have a watercolor paper, you just start off with your watercolor paper because you're not going to be using white at all. But if you made a mistake, you can just wipe it with white, because if you keep going over the paintings, you're not going to get that luminosity, and you need that transparency in the sky. Okay, so I'm going to cut off the video now, and let's get started.